Deputy Connolly. Thank you.
So many questions, I'd like to keep you here all day. But luckily, you're time limited, or I'm time limited. Just to clarify something, the control of the schools first, on page, in relation to the schools. I thought I understood that, and then when I went back on it, I didn't from your second answer, the transfer of the control of 15 schools.
Yeah.
And it's on page...
My understanding, Deputy, on that...
Will I just see where it's me that's misunderstanding it, and it starts at page 13 and 14 on your appropriation accounts. And I understood that these control of the schools were being transferred; they were no longer in educational use. You said, and then when I look, they're all functioning schools. So maybe just clarify that for me. I'm lost somewhere on that explanation.
No, I think I created the confusion, not you. Yeah. I was asked about. I understood that initially. I was asked about when schools stopped being used at schools, and so I gave an answer about that. But the second issue is my understanding is when we have a lease arrangement with a school, we still own the school, but I think it's not returned. It's been in our control in the accounts.
So just while you're looking at 15 schools at a value of 128 million. The control was transferred to the school authorities, and the list is there. One of them is Galway. It's
a technical adjustment.
That's all.
We still own the school building, but it's because we have a lease in place, so the ownership.
We'll take Galway for example. Gaelscoil Dehija or more. That's one of the 15 there, and the value was 5 million plus, and so on. So just explain to me practically.
My understanding in the general is that we own the site. But that we build the school, and that we lease the school, and that the accounting treatment is when we lease the school, there's a technical adjustment.
So it's just an accountancy.
Yeah,
so you're showing it as an asset, is it? Or not showing it as an asset?
We're not showing it as an asset because we have a lease in place for it.
So you're no longer showing that as an asset on your books? All right. That's okay.
It's initially shown as an asset and then transferred in the year.
Yeah, it was just the confusion afterwards was confusing.
And I created the confusion.
That's okay. That's all right. And then I'm going to go, if I can, from climate change back to the points that Deputy Cullinan raised. And so if we look at climate change, and I've said this report, there's a window of opportunity. This is the last stall, really, that was going to have any chance to take action against climate change. So as a department, what actions have you taken on a policy level? What's happening on the ground in relation to climate change?
Well, I think that in terms of buildings.
Well, I'm hoping you're going to tell me. I have a whole list here in terms of energy efficiency.
Yeah.
Solar panels.
We have a wide range of different measures in place in terms of buildings. I can provide you with a detailed written briefing on that. But effectively, the spec for buildings is going up and up and up, and we are providing a huge amount of new builds which have to meet these high specs, which have regard to all those issues.
Okay, of the 15 schools, they were all new schools presumably listed. We'll take those as an example, and Galway has one. Yeah. Are they all energy efficient of the solar panels?
It would depend on the nature of what works in a school context, given the use of schools during. There are particular issues around, given the particular times of the year that schools are in high use and the times of the day that schools are in high use. So they would all be operating on an energy efficient basis, and our specs are going up and up. So the requirements of new schools are increasing all the time. We use the summer works then to fund back for upgrades going back. We have a small unit in the planning and building unit which is working on ensuring that the planning for being as up to speed on all of these issues as possible is in place.
So this is special unit.
We've a couple of experts, and they are incorporated into the guidance then for buildings. And we have trialled a number of different aspects. So, for example, we trialled the use of different aspects of energy efficiency, and some of them worked and some of them didn't in the schools.
Can I just, you're telling me there's a special unit, a small unit. So if I follow up this separately, there'll be documentation there that I can follow up. I'm thinking of a particular school in Galway, Scollon Gaelga, and it cost an absolute fortune. Not the Department of Education's fault. It was the cost of the compulsory purchase of the land. I think it must be the most expensive school in the country. I supported that school. I'm putting my hands up. But I don't see that as an energy efficient school. I don't see that climate change was taken in. And I'm not going to... What I'm asking Has the department learned? Is there a proactive programme? And will I see a trail separate from...
Standards are going up all the time as we test things.
No, I understand that.
And you will see...
Yeah. I don't mean to interrupt you, Mr. Brian, I'm going to interrupt you. You've repeated that the standards are going up. No, what I want to know is if I separately from here, because I don't want to use up my few minutes, if I follow up, I'll see a total commitment to climate change measures in your policy in the Department of Education in relation to all schools, primary, secondary, university.
In relation to the specifications for new builds, yes.
Okay.
And in relation to retrofitting, that's a more challenging area where we can do that under the summer works, but we don't have access. Because of the demographics, we've had to prioritise expansion at schools and the need to have a school place for every child. So yes, we have put significant expenditure into the likes of the summer works and so on, but yes, there is still a huge demand for further investment.
Okay, I'll come back to that separately. In relation to the National Training Fund Act, and there are 3 functions, as I understand it, for upskilling for those who are employed, unemployed, and then the more important one for me as well is providing information in relation to the necessary skills. Who's responsible for that in terms of advising the government what necessary skills are necessary? Where are we going with that? Because I'm looking at this, and again, I don't think it's your fault. I think it's the government, in a sense, that is the smallest percentage of the budget allocated to training and skills.
We actually have a really good national skills infrastructure in Ireland, and we're improving it. We're one of the few countries that turned their education and training system, especially in terms of further and higher education, towards STEM and ICT at a very early stage. We have had an expert group in future skills needs, which has done planning in sectors. Yes. We have had huge investments in ICT and STEM from about 17 or 18 years ago on, and turned our system in that direction. We have a very high proportion of STEM graduates compared to other European countries. We published a skills strategy last year, and we're establishing a National Skills Council, which we're going to be putting in place in the near future. The Minister will be making an announcement about the membership of the Skills Council in the next number of weeks, I understand.
He'll be making an
announcement about the membership of the National Skills Council in a number of weeks. So we will have a national skills infrastructure to advise on priorities within the skills area. So obviously there are actions. We have an ICT action plan, we have a foreign languages strategy under development, we have a STEM strategy under development for schools. There are a number of overlapping actions, but we need to bring it together in an overall
Again, I had the privilege of awarding, amongst other people, the week before last in the GMIT in Galway, and clearly there's an acknowledgement that there's a lack of training in the necessary skills. That was in relation to a very positive thing, awarding prizes for first, second and third in Leaving Cert and Junior Cert. And there was clearly, from talking to the men and women on the ground, an absolute failure on the part of policy and government level to provide the necessary skills. I'm glad you're telling me that's happening, but it's a reaction to the failure to haven't done so. Isn't that right?
No, I wouldn't agree with that deputy.
Right.
As I said, I think we're probably at the vanguard of developments internationally in terms of turning our education. There are aspects which are progressing at different rates. Obviously, our apprenticeship systems are different than internationally, and we're developing those.
Just tell me tell me about those first now, the apprenticeships that are...
Well, we have a range of traditional apprenticeships which are being updated, mostly in the construction area. And then we have a new apprenticeship council, which is looking at proposals from providers and industry to establish new apprenticeships. We have an apprenticeship action plan to bring those new apprenticeships on board. To bring about the cultural change to embed new types of apprenticeships within employment and within further and higher education provision is a big issue, and we have initiatives underway, and a number of new apprenticeships in financial services and insurance have been announced already.
I know about those. I was talking about the more practical skills on the ground that have become less and less practical in a sense with technology. But I'm not going to, I don't accept your answer. Sorry, I do accept your answer. I'm not entirely happy with it. Just in relation to NEPS and the psychological service. Where would I start with that?
school in Ireland.
NEPS is not in every school in Ireland. Is it? Very good. Yeah, that's a good start. Thank you, Chair. Yeah. What schools don't have NEPS? Where are we with NEPS? How can you stand over a system where so many hours are allocated to a school and they have to make a Solomon's choice in relation to which child they will select for assessment? Where does the money for when the school at its wit's end goes to the private service, gets a private assessment and then they recoup the money, where does that show up in your books? How much is going to the private sector and so on?
Yeah.
And are you in the middle of a review at the moment, or have I wrong information? NEPS.
Yeah. Our aim is that NEPS, which is a part of the department, is to provide a high-quality, comprehensive education psychology service to all schools. That's the aim.
Will
and there's a tiered.
Just don't give me the mission or anything like that. I've read it, but just what is on the ground?
No, I think that on the ground, I think the way you described it as it being based on assessments of individuals, that's part of what I'm seeking to address in the response.
Okay.
The aim is actually to have a tiered service delivery model of casework working with individual learners or their teachers and parents, and also systemic work working to improve all outcomes with learners, so that there's a provision of advice and support.
Mr. O'Fowler, I'm going to be stopped very soon. I honestly
okay.
know. I really. Okay. Am I wrong when I say that the existing service up to now was to provide an assessment to a school based on numbers, based on 1 or 2 assessments a year, and the schools were left with making Hobson's choice or a Solomon choice, whichever you like? Am I correct?
I don't agree with your analysis of what the psychological service is. It's not primarily to provide individual assessments. That is one aspect of what it does. So in relation to individual assessments, I can discuss that, but I don't consider that to be the primary role. The primary role is to assist schools in working with their children, and where it's not possible for the schools to do that, there is assessments undertaken by NEPS. But the discourse on NEPS has been primarily about assessment of individual children. I think is not an appropriate description of the complexity of the role that they have.
Well, Mr. O'Fowler, I'd happen to agree with you in the sense that I've had the privilege of having that background, and so, would I'm asking, what you did was reduce it to assessments. What you did was give so many hours to a school. Isn't that correct? There were so many assessments allowed per year. If you could answer that question. In
relation to specifically to assessments?
Yes. That's correct.
Yes.
Okay. That's correct.
We protected NEPS when the moratorium was in place to seek to enable them to keep their numbers up. But yes, they've had a difficulty in having coverage across the country, even with that amount of numbers.
And
so yes, I'm not.
Okay, good. So now we've got that answer. And to make up for that gap, the schools then were left to go to the private system, ring up a psychologist that they weren't very familiar with, pay 500 or 600, and then recoup the money from the department. So, that's a yes or no, Mr. O'Fowler?
Not merely to go to the private sector. There was a scheme for commissioning assessments in place with a number of people on a list who were in the private sector. Okay. And yes, schools could go to these people, and yes, the department would pay. So
good, we have 2 yeses to that. So now, you probably won't give me a yes to the next one. It was a completely sketchy service. It was an insult, really, to call that a psychological service to the school. Now, I'm not expecting you to agree with me, but what I want to know, is there a circular gone out that's changing that system now?
Okay.
What's in progress now?
Well, we managed to reduce the number of external assessments significantly. They were running at more than 4,000 in 7 and 8, but we reduced that, but it has come down to around about 2,000. The lowest level it was at was 1,700. Yes, we would prefer not to be in a position where this was playing such a major part in the overall provision. The Minister is very interested in appropriately in well-being, and it features very strongly in the action plan.
Has a circular gone out changing the system? Is the system in the process of being changed? Has it been changed, the NEPS system?
I'm not aware of any circular that haven't gone out, but we are actively looking at the role of NEPS in supporting well-being.
What does actively? What does that mean in terms of a review?
We are expanding the numbers in NEPS.
Good.
There's a commitment in the programme for government to expand the numbers in NEPS, and we're initially, as part of that, we are increasing under the expansion of the JESH scheme the number of NEPS psychologists this year.
Honestly,
it's a minefield.
Well, you've made it a minefield, I have to say. I worked in the area a long time ago. And how would you assess the needs? How will the needs be assessed if there's no assessment?
Well, there won't be a formal assessment as a way to unlock resources. But NEPS will continue to work with teachers, with schools and with children to assist either schools to identify those needs or to work directly with children.
I want to ask 2 other questions before so I'm going to leave it and come back to you. It's a total mess. Okay, it was totally unjust. I don't know if it's any better what you're going to do. I'll have to look at it. How many appeals have gone in under JESH for the failure? I'm thinking of one particular school in Galway. I'm sure I'm not alone, where they have all of the qualifications to qualify, but they don't qualify. So how many schools in Galway, city and county, have appealed, and how many throughout the country? That's, you don't know?
I don't have a specific number. I can give you an approximate number for the country,
yes,
which is in the order of about 100.
100 have appealed.
Yes.
So you might come back to me with the breakdown?
I can do that, yeah.
Lovely. Second thing is in relation to tendering. And I'm thinking of a school which I won't name today, but something that has been brought to my attention. And a gymnasium was built, or a sports hall. Vast amounts of public money go into that. Fundraising goes into that. And then there's a proposal that a private company will operate that in the school system. Is that something that you have been made aware of, become aware of, and what's your attitude to that? If it's not clear, I'll rephrase my question.
Obviously, there's tendering for the procurement of the building, which has to follow the public sector guidelines. You're not talking about that.
I'm talking about it. It's up. You've put in a lot of money.
So if a school has a resource that it's seeking to widen the use of for the general public, that's a really positive thing, and we're putting a lot of effort into encouraging schools to engage with their communities.
Just listen to maybe I'll rephrase my question.
I'm going there.
No, but I'll be stopped. The school, you've put in vast amounts of money, I think maybe over 400,000, okay? There's been fundraising. It's going to be given out to a company to run it. No tendering.
Yeah.
Okay,
well,
is that something that you stand over, or have you a policy on that?
If a school has an asset, it should tender for the provision of a service. It should be tendering for the provision of a service. It sounds like a good. If a school is seeking to get its PE hall used by the public and needs assistance in doing that, sounds like potentially a good idea. But it is something that should be tendered for.
Okay, and finally, in relation to the additional schools, and again, representations have been made, and I know that you want to increase the amount of non-religious schools or multi-denominational schools. Educate Together in Galway has put forward a very, very comprehensive submission, and they have highlighted mistakes, well, let's say, differences with the Department of Education in relation to the position in Galway on the ground, where there are waiting lists for schools, waiting lists. And so my question is, they have asked for a meeting, they've asked to come forward to work with you in relation to this. Are you open to that?
Is it a primary or post-primary, Deputy?
Post-primary.
Well, we have put in 2 new schools in the Galway area, Daishka and Clare Galway.
I'm aware of all that. That's all been set out to them.
We have the way in which we deal with new schools is we know the numbers who are going to school. We know the transfer rates. We're willing to be challenged on that. But what we don't do is respond to a request from a patron to a new school. We decide on the need for a new school, and we'd be open to engaging with anybody who thinks that things can change, patterns of movement in and out of cities change. So we'd be open to talking to anybody in exploring those issues. That's very good. But we do talk to Educate Together all the time.
We're not arguing about patrons here. That's not the issue. The issue is they've come forward and they've comprehensive facts that are different from what you've said. So an engagement would be
we always welcome.
Thank you, Chair.
Open to that.
Thank you, Chair.
Okay, you've got a yes on that one.